I'm a psychologist, and I deal with individuals and with problems of individuals, and I really know very little about politics, except that I'm a regular newspaper reader. But today, I wanted to talk about something that is really not in my field. What does psychology have to say about a problem that is clearly an urgent problem for the state of Israel, the issue of peace with the Palestinians? And again, it's not going to come from any psychological expertise. I'm just going to look at the psychology of it. And really the news, for a psychologist, the news are really bad. It is very difficult to imagine a worse constellation, psychologically, from the point of view of the Israelis and to a lesser extent from the point of view of the Palestinians. In psychological terms, the conditions seem very bad for peace. In the first place, the situation is one of very asymmetric power. Israelis clearly have a great deal more power than the Palestinians, and they have a great deal of power over the Palestinians. Power has known psychological effects. The powerful inevitably, and this is really nothing special to the Israelis, you can induce that in the laboratory very, very quickly by making people feel powerful through any manipulation at all. You make them less sympathetic to others, less empathetic to others, more prone to contempt. People very naturally slip into the situation of being the powerful with all the entitlements that accompanies power. This is not something we should blame. This is something that just happens. It is part of the psychology of power, and it is part of the psychology of asymmetric power. That looks quite bad, actually, because peace between inferiors and superiors, between a population that is powerful and a population that is much less powerful, is quite complicated, especially when the other side feels differently about things and feel differently about themselves than the powerful feel about them. All of this is psychologically inevitable. There is something else that is in this situation, and that again looks psychologically just about as bad as it could be. And this is that in order to achieve peace with the Palestinians, Israel has to give up things that it's very comfortable with. And at the moment, Israel enjoys peace, or relative peace. There is very little hostile activity. People are not particularly anxious. This feels like a stable situation. It takes very little time for people to adapt to a regime and to a situation and to feel, even though they know that it is not permanent, to feel that it is permanent, to feel as if it was going to be permanent. And now we have a situation which is good, and we're talking about peace and the costs of peace, and the costs of peace are huge. And all of that, I'm saying absolutely nothing new, except that from the psychological point of view, we know that what the kind of conflict that is involved for the Israelis and for the Israeli population, I'm not talking about the leadership, but just the structural situation, is one that is extremely unfavorable, because you have a group, and it would be exactly the same thing if it were an individual, faced with a situation, a requirement to achieve peace by making concessions. And by making immediate concessions and by making painful concessions. And the concessions are clearly very painful, but indeed we know that any concession is painful. If we have learned anything from the psychology of judgment and decision-making, it is that there is a very large asymmetry between gains and losses. People are much more sensitive to losses than they are to possible gains. And in this case, we know what the losses are, and the gains are ambiguous and delayed and uncertain. The losses are essentially certain. A large disruption internally, very costly, giving up territories, giving up control. The gains are dubious, they're quite uncertain, and they're delayed. And we know, again, from the psychology of decision-making, that gains intrinsically, even if they are immediate, are less significant and less convincing than losses, less compelling than losses. Delayed gains are much less compelling than immediate gains, and therefore than immediate losses. And uncertain gains are certainly less compelling than sure things. Then there is, then there is a problem of how each side views the other. And here again, the psychology, I think, is quite discouraging. There is in every quarrel, and that is true for individual quarrels, and it is true at any other level, at quarrels between populations and states, there is an asymmetry between the way that people perceive themselves and the way that they perceive their adversary. And in general, people perceive themselves as reacting to the adversary. The adversary is doing things, and we are responding to what they are doing, or we are responding to what they might do. Our view of the adversary is typically quite different. And this is general. You can check your memory for personal quarrels or spousal quarrels, and you will find exactly the same thing, that in a quarrel, a typical thing that happens is saying you are always. That is, there is a tendency to attribute the behavior of the other side to permanent hostility, to permanent traits, to things that are not under control. What is the most difficult thing to perceive in a situation of conflict is the effect of your own actions on the actions of the other side. I feel myself reacting to you when we quarrel, but I don't feel that you are reacting to me. Your hostility is permanent, and there is nothing really that I can do about your hostility. I spoke earlier of the uncertainty of the gains associated with peace and of the delay. And here again, we encounter a psychological problem that seems almost insuperable. And this is that if there is one type of mistake that people absolutely hate, it is the mistake of trusting somebody who later turns out to be untrustworthy. Our fear of betrayal is intense. We hate being betrayed. Our fear of missed opportunities to make peace, or of being, and again, you can see that at the individual level, and it plays out, I think, at the national level as well, that the fear of missing opportunities or of not trusting someone who is actually trustworthy, that's a minor fear and is considered a minor mistake. But somebody who willingly steps in and does something, trusts the other side, and is later betrayed, it is judged as folly, it is judged as naivete. Being naive is very bad. People who anticipate that find it extremely costly. That is in particular the case in this situation of peace. Peace involves trust. And to whatever extent, Israel may hope, and I expect will, retain a great deal of control over the military situation, it will relinquish control. And relinquishing control is extremely painful. So I would say from every point of view, I was thinking about that topic, I cannot really find a good psychological reason to be hopeful about the Israeli side, about the population being willing to, being eager, being very excited by the prospect of making peace. So where is the hope? And there is hope. But we should not expect a change to arise from individuals. We should not expect a change to arise from mass politics. The change will occur, if and when it does occur, because of leadership. Leaders can change things. Leaders can induce confidence. Leaders can convince people that risks are worth taking. Leaders can convince people that the distant future is worth fighting for, even at the cost of immediate pain. And that's the only hope I see, but there is hope, because I'm convinced that the population of Israel, the people of Israel, and I think the Palestinian people, can be led to peace. But without leadership, it will not happen by itself. Thank you.